and citizens. They have been, like in Vietnam and China, they have no respect for human rights whatsoever. We all know that. However, because of our ignorance or because of our inaction, we let our government, the Australian government for instance, have been funding for this murderous regime in Vietnam to the tune of nearly 2 billion Australian dollars in the past 15 years, ladies and gentlemen. Our taxpayer money had been funded to prop up a regime like the communist regime in Vietnam in the last decade, nearly 4 decades, ladies and gentlemen, and to the tune of 2 billion Australian dollars. This money should have been spent on our hospital, should have been saving our job, our children. Why we cut funding on our education, cut funding on our hospital and health to give money to this murderous regime in Vietnam? It's about time, ladies and gentlemen, that we must act. Because if we continue to prop up these regimes, human rights abuse regime and communist dictatorship, then it will affect us just like North Korea affecting on us right now, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why I'm quite sure at your fellow Australians, we all should care about human rights, should care about freedom of other nations, particularly in our neighboring countries, ladies and gentlemen. Otherwise, that's why our peacekeeping, the Aussie diggers are fighting from First World War, Second World War, Vietnam War, and right now they're peacekeeping everywhere to try to retain the freedom in our world so that it won't affect us like North Korea doing right now for the rest of the region. And China is threatening the entire region, ladies and gentlemen. China ambition is no doubt, is not less than North Korea. North Korea not got nuclear bomb, but China got money and power, and they are using soft power at the moment. But they building military bases right in the heart of our ocean, in the Southeast China Sea, ladies and gentlemen, and Vietnam. Completely, Vietnam is a communist regime. They shake hands with the communist China. They ignore communist China in our very own region, ladies and gentlemen. That is why the people in Vietnam today, they don't want. And today, the Vietnamese communist regime sent a propaganda tour right inside Crown citizens. They have been, like in Vietnam and China, they have no respect for human rights whatsoever. We all know that. However, because of our ignorance or because of our inaction, we let our government, the Australian government for instance, have been funding for this murderous regime in Vietnam to the tune of nearly 2 billion Australian dollars in the past 15 years, ladies and gentlemen. Our taxpayer money had been funded to prop up a regime like the communist regime in Vietnam in the last decade, nearly 4 decades, ladies and gentlemen, and to the tune of 2 billion Australian dollars. This money should have been spent on our hospital, should have been saving our job, our children. Why we cut funding on our education, cut funding on our hospital and health to give money to this murderous regime in Vietnam? It's about time, ladies and gentlemen, that we must act. Because if we continue to prop up these regimes, human rights abuse regime and communist dictatorship, then it will affect us just like North Korea affecting on us right now, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why I'm quite sure at your fellow Australians, we all should care about human rights, should care about freedom of other nations, particularly in our neighboring countries, ladies and gentlemen. Otherwise, that's why our peacekeeping, the Aussie diggers are fighting from First World War, Second World War, Vietnam War, and right now they're peacekeeping everywhere to try to retain the freedom in our world so that it won't affect us like North Korea doing right now for the rest of the region. And China is threatening the entire region, ladies and gentlemen. China ambition is no doubt, is not less than North Korea. North Korea not got nuclear bomb, but China got money and power, and they are using soft power at the moment. But they building military bases right in the heart of our ocean, in the Southeast China Sea, ladies and gentlemen, and Vietnam. Completely, Vietnam is a communist regime. They shake hands with the communist China. They ignore communist China in our very own region, ladies and gentlemen. That is why the people in Vietnam today, they don't want. And today, the Vietnamese communist regime sent a propaganda tour right inside Crown Casino, right in Melbourne, in the heart of Melbourne, try to misleading the whole Australian society about the real situation in Vietnam today. In Vietnam today, if you are a blogger, if you are a songwriter, if you are a singer, you must have permission. You must have a license. Do you have license to sing in Australia? I don't think so. Do you have license to say something? I don't think so. But in Vietnam today, if you dare to raise, you can do anything. But absolutely, you cannot raise, you cannot talk about human rights, you cannot talk about freedom, you cannot talk about democracy. That's the three things Vietnam today are absolutely, that is, you will almost have a capital punishment. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see a picture right in front of you here. One of the victims of very recently, that's Mr. Nguyễn Hữu Tấn. He's a 39 years old young man. And simply because they suspected the police in Vietnam, the communist police in Vietnam suspected he having some sort of seditious activity. They searched his house, and when they found nothing, they put him into the police custody. 24 hours later, he was released back to his home with his throat cut, and he was murdered, brutally murdered, simply because of suspicion of sedition. Ladies and gentlemen, what kind of this innocent man left behind 9 years old son and a wife, young wife, and his occupation just a street trader. Ladies and gentlemen, that is why today the people in Vietnam are fed up with this regime, and we in Australia also, the community here, are fed up with the government of Australia. It's about time that we should stop aid to Vietnam, to regime like the Vietnamese communist regime and any communist regime at all, because that's against our value, against Australia values. Australia values about freedom, about democracy, about human rights, and this is go against our value that our government continue to prop up regimes like the communist regime in Vietnam. And that is why we are here today, opposed to the president of the Vietnamese communist regime inside Crown Casino by saying, please join with us. This is what the Vietnamese people want today. 90 million of them want. That is, they want freedom, 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 human rights, human rights, democracy, democracy, human rights, freedom, human rights, freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, from the outset, we must apologize to the diners of Merrywell Restaurant and Bar. We really appreciate your patience and your tolerance and your understanding of our presence here, disturbing your peaceful dinners. But on the other hand, we never seen any negative, reaction from the diner of Merrywell Restaurant and Bars, because you understand why we are here. You share with us why we should be here. We should be here because we should highlight the value that we, all Australians, want to highlight. That is, we respect human rights. We support anybody who are suffering from human rights and lack of freedom, basic freedom and democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Australian ways. And that is what I am so proud to be an Australian. I'm so proud to be a Melburnian, because we do care. So during this, tomorrow is Melbourne Cup Day. We know that we very much, our mind focus on horse race and everyone who doesn't. However, we felt that tonight in this very Crown Casino, the Vietnamese communist regime has spent money. Ladies and gentlemen, recently in Vietnam, we have suffered a natural disaster with floods. And floods make worse by the unprotecting action of the Vietnamese communist regime, the corrupted regime that sold our lands and soil to China and absolutely protect our people, did not protect our people at all in environmental disaster. And that is why today, but yet they got spend millions of dollars a year, send their propaganda tours inside Crown Casino and into Melbourne, ladies and gentlemen, to give misleading information and spread impression on the regime in Vietnam today. And that is why we feel obliged as the people who enjoy freedom and democracy in this country. We want to be here to reflect the Australia indignant of the human rights abuses that happen in Vietnam today. And together, let's join together by saying, freedom! Freedom! Human rights! Human rights! Democracy! Democracy! Freedom! 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 Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today because we want to highlight what's happening in Vietnam today. Because right here, we got the Vietnamese terrorist regime has spent their monies and sending their singers inside Crown Casino, ladies and gentlemen, to propaganda about their regime. And that is, we want to highlight the reality of Vietnam today. Vietnam today, you got all the Vietnamese communist regime and all their cards and all their officials are filthily rich. They rich not only by ripping off, by really oppressing the Vietnamese people, but they also rich from foreign aids. The foreign aids given by the Australian government in the past few decades, ladies and gentlemen, Australia already given the regime in Vietnam, the human rights abuse regime in Vietnam, to the tune of nearly 2 billion Australian dollars. Ladies and gentlemen, these monies should have been spent on our hospital, should have been spent on our schools, should have been spent on our factories for our Australian, rather than prop up regimes, dictatorial regime like the murderous regime in Vietnam today. Ladies and gentlemen, the people, the money that we gave, the Australian government gave to Vietnam, did not go to the poor, did not go to the oppressed people in Vietnam. In fact, it propped up the regime to give them more strength to oppress our people even further. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, that is not what the Vietnamese people wanted today. The Vietnamese people in Vietnam today want freedom, freedom, human rights, human rights, human rights, democracy, 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 freedom, human rights, democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, that is why we are here today. And we are here because you may have visited Vietnam in recent times and you may have thought everything seemed to be okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it's far from the truth. Because right now, today, as Vietnam hosting the APEC summit, the Human Rights Watch, an international human rights organization, have put out a report, the most recent report, giving alarm, giving alert to these world leaders that gathering in Vietnam, in Da Nang, Vietnam today for the APEC summit, that to highlight the situation in Vietnam, whereas hundreds of human rights activists, bloggers, songwriters, priests, monks, nuns, and you name it, they all in jail because they asking for the basic freedom and human rights for the people in Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the real situation in Vietnam today. And also, you also notice that some of the notice board, we put it up, also alerted you to the most recent natural disaster in Vietnam. In Vietnam, not long ago, nearly a year ago now, for a year ago, the toxic waste, the Chinese company in Vietnam released toxic waste right into our ocean and seas and kills at least 2 fishermen, 2 divers who dived down into that sea that was killed, and millions of seabirds and colonies were completely wiped out in the 4 coastal provinces of Vietnam, ladies and gentlemen, and millions of fish and seabirds were killed by this Chinese company, released toxic waste right into the ocean of Vietnam. And what the Vietnamese communists do? They did nothing. In fact, the Taiwanese company gave the Vietnamese communist regime only $500 million to so-called compensation for the victim. Ladies and gentlemen, but the environmental disaster in Vietnam have affected millions of fishermen, all their livelihoods gone, and all the seabirds and all the sea creature in nearly 200 kilometers of sea, of coastal line were completely wiped off, destroyed. And today, that environment is still, the fish is still poisoned. And yet the Vietnamese communist regime have let export seafood from Vietnam to Australia, to everywhere in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, they did nothing to really force this company, Chinese company, to clean up the environment. If it was in Australia, it would cost billions, hundreds of billions to clean up. That is the right way to do. But the Vietnamese communist regime just disregard the livelihood and the safety of the Vietnamese people themselves. Just simply because China is now completely control Vietnam. Vietnam is in effect. We already regard by Vietnamese that we are now the second Tibet, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why we should be we should be caring about the freedom in people, for the people of Vietnam. Because people of Vietnam today, if we got our freedom and our democracy and our human rights, we would stand up against China expansionism. We would stand up against China belligerent destroying of our sea and land, as well as control our sovereignty. To just only have to look at North Korea today, how North Korea is now threatening Australia's safety, ladies and gentlemen, because but like all other communist regime, if we do nothing, we do not help and raise our voice for the people in this country, this regime will threaten Australia's security and safety itself. So that is why we are here tonight opposing to the presence of the Vietnamese communist regime right inside Crown Casino. And for that, please join us by saying, Vietnamese communist regime out of Melbourne! Vietnamese communist regime out of Melbourne! Vietnamese communist regime out of Melbourne! Vietnamese communist terrorists out of Melbourne! Vietnamese communist terrorists out of Melbourne! Vietnamese communist terrorists out of Melbourne! Ladies and gentlemen, we really appreciate your time to pay attention to what's going on in our neighboring areas and region, ladies and gentlemen, particularly in Vietnam, where we're from. We feel that, like all of you, we should care about the freedom of our neighboring countries. We should care about the freedom and democracy of other countries. Because just like North Korea, if we do not care, they start to threaten our own safety and security, ladies and gentlemen, with nuclear bombs. And China is not better, ladies and gentlemen. China had declared the entire areas spreading from southern China right down to the Philippines, to the bordering of the Indonesia Sea, ladies and gentlemen. They declare that is their seas. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Chinese ambition. Make no mistake about it. And Vietnam has become the next victim of China. And China is a danger to Australia itself. Make no mistake about it. We, the Vietnamese, have known the Chinese more than 5,000 years. Actually, we fought the Chinese to keep out their independence. And due to the bravery and independence spirit of our people, we still have our country today. But we worry about Australia. We worry about our own people who cannot stand up against Chinese expansionism and Chinese taking over seas and land in Vietnam, because the Vietnamese communist regime make it a capital punishment, make it a treacherous crime, ladies and gentlemen, for if our young people dare to stand up for the sovereignty of Vietnam today against China, because they are both communists, ladies and gentlemen, and that is why we must oppose communism, because communist means no freedom. Communists mean no democracy. Communists mean no human rights, including the rights to stand up against foreign invasion in our country. That is why today we are here to oppose the Vietnamese communist terrorists who present inside Crown Casino today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join with us instead by saying freedom! 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 Human rights! Human rights! Human rights! Democracy! Democracy! Democracy!
My fellow Australians, it has been brought to my attention, not really brought to my attention, but I would like to bring it to your attention. Why are we here, ladies and gentlemen? I just want to bring to you all the facts of what's happening in Vietnam. One was mentioned to me by the Honorable Malcolm Fraser. Being an Australian doesn't mean that you're actually restricted by the boundary of Australian border. So if you see where there is injustice, where you see there's human rights being violated, you should voice. You should voice to ensure that human rights and freedoms are ensured for people that other than Australians as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I have my fellow Australian here, gentleman here, just come up to me and ask, what happened to the Sparrow Islands in South Asia Sea, East Vietnam Sea? What happened to those islands? Can I take a moment to explain it to you? At this particular moment, China disregard all the international treaty and they just move the military and build their base right in front of those islands. This disregard the ownership of Vietnam, the Philippines, and other nations in the area as well. This, to me, is the threat. The threat not only to the region of Southeast Asia, but it is a threat to the world peace, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine today, China is trying to actually conquer the area that in its reach. One day when they achieve that objective, I'm sure they will expand their border. Ladies and gentlemen, Australia is right in its doorstep. This is the concern that we as Australians should worry. And this is why we keep raising the issue between Vietnam and China. Why? Vietnam is actually in bed with China. Why do I say that? Because Chinese government is a communist. Vietnam government is also a communist, ladies and gentlemen. So it's quietly surrender its sovereignty rights to the foreign force. This is actually keeping Australia should keep out for watch. Not only that, it's actually threat to national security of Australia, but also in that route, it's actually the sea route of free navigation in the area as well, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of economic trade is actually gone past that sea, and China want to control that, ladies and gentlemen. And that, to me, is very bad. Another issue, just put that aside, I want to bring to your attention. What happened with our Australian government? Every year, could you believe it? Every year, our Australian government is giving Vietnamese communist regime $86 million. What for? To improve human rights, to improve the environmental issue in Vietnam. What happened, ladies and gentlemen? On those two objectives, I can tell you what happened. The Sea of Vietnam is being killed at the moment. The marine life is actually no longer survivable in its own sea. Why? Because the Vietnamese communist regime allow so-called industrialization in Vietnam to dump its toxic waste into the sea. Fish, marine life have died, and fish belly up hundreds of thousands of tons of fish. This fish has been collected by the Vietnamese fish industry. What for, ladies and gentlemen? And you're concerned that this fish or this seafood industry will one day end up on your dinner plate. And what's going to happen to your health, ladies and gentlemen? That's $86 million of our hard-earned taxpaying money. And this is what happened in Vietnam. These two gentlemen here, the one on the right-hand side here is a religious leader, religious follower, just want to normally practice his own religious freedom, right? He ended up actually copying a sanction from the Vietnamese communist regime. They barricade him and they without provide any food or drink with him for a number of weeks. His family of 9 people, including a 9-month-old baby, was actually together with him, ladies and gentlemen. He has been arrested, and who knows whereabouts he is. At this day, we do not know. We fear greatly for his well-being, ladies and gentlemen. The gentleman right next to him is actually Mr. Nguyễn Hữu Tấn. Mr. Nguyễn Hữu Tấn was actually being accused of overthrowing the government in Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, in Vietnam today is a worrying concern. What is the worrying concern? Everyone that actually, if the Vietnamese communist regime want to arrest anyone at all, what do? They will actually accuse them of actually overthrowing the government, ladies and gentlemen. That is a very vague law. It's called Article 6, Penal Code Article 88, ladies and gentlemen. So it's very vague. And this is what happened. This guy was accused of actually overthrowing the government, orchestrating to overthrow the government. And he was summoned for one night, and he ended up dead. His throat was completely split, ladies and gentlemen. He left behind a young wife and a young baby daughter. His sister in America have to go to the Congress House in America and kneel and beg for the U.S. MPs or parliamentarians in the U.S. to actually help her, ladies and gentlemen. I'm bringing all of these facts to you, so you, as my fellow Australians, can appreciate what is going on with our tax-paying money, what is going on with the real situation of human rights and freedom of speech and freedom of religion in Vietnam. You and I have a responsibility to voice that. I believe in the values of Australian society have for a long time, and that is to value the humanity values, to value the freedom that we have here in Australia. You are very free to actually scroll down the street and actually enjoy your view. But you know, imagine if I were to do this whole protest in Vietnam today. My friend here, Mr. Phong, and I, and other with my countrymen women here will be arrested, and we will be met with brutal force, ladies and gentlemen. This is what happened in Vietnam. We could be murdered as well. You know that? Not even in Vietnam, overseas, there was a gentleman from Vietnam was seeking refugees in Germany. He was actually seeking refugees from Germany, and he was being protected by the Germany authority in Germany, ladies and gentlemen. You know what happened? They sent their official in plain clothes, secret police, if I can put it that way, and they kidnapped this guy in Germany's sovereignty soil, and they brought him back to Vietnam and brought him to trial, ladies and gentlemen. Who knows what is happening to him? I don't know what's happening to him. He could have been well dead already. Ladies and gentlemen, this could happen to us. We are your fellow Australians. This could happen to us as well. One day they could secretly visit our house, and we could be well disappear. This is what happened in Germany. The Germany, if you go and search for kidnapped Vietnamese from Germany, that the Vietnamese officials send their secret police in and kidnap them and brought back to Vietnam. This could happen to us. And we are tonight, we protest in here is because there is a propaganda concert organized right in Crown Casino by the Vietnamese communist regime so that they can cover up all the dirty work that their regime is actually doing. They're killing people. They're putting religious leaders in jail. They're putting bloggers, they're putting newspapers, actually reporters in jail, ladies and gentlemen. I just read a letter signed by 68 of our Australian MPs raising concerns, serious concerns of actually this year alone has been over 20 people have sentenced to over 10 years imprisonment, ladies and gentlemen, just because they want to expose what is true in Vietnam. They want to have a voice. They want to have a freedom of speech, and this is not right. We Australians have always embraced and values the value of freedom. We cannot stand idle, ladies and gentlemen. My fellow Australians, did you know that Australian government giving the Vietnamese regime, $86 million per year for the two purposes only, and that is to improve the human rights, to improve the environmental issue in Vietnam. And it's not working, ladies and gentlemen. $86 million per year, that's a lot of our hard-earned money. Don't you think that it's actually worth actually keep that in Australia for our education, for our children's education, for our transport, to improve jobs in Australia? Why is it that our fellow Australians lose are losing jobs left, right, and center, and we are sending money overseas to a regime that never accountable for their finance, ladies and gentlemen. This is sad. Over the past 10 years, I can confirm with you that our Australian dollars giving the Vietnamese communist regime over $1.2 billion, nearly $2 billion, Mr. Phong was saying. This is something, is a concern to me. This money should be well spent here in the Australian society to create jobs for our fellow Australians. A lot of my fellow Australians lose jobs from the holding closing down. Why is it that every year $86 million being sent away? Why is it that every 10 years over nearly $2 billion is being sent away to the foreign aid, to something that we cannot have control of? This is disaster, ladies and gentlemen. I do have liaison with other religions in Vietnam as well, and find out what the real situation there. Where is actually most affected by Formosa. By the way, Formosa is a company, it's a steel plant company that keep dumping toxic waste into Vũng Án Sea, and this is where it's actually killed a lot of fish and marine life in that area. The priest have no other option because he witnessed that every day himself, that the fishermen can no longer fish because there's no more fish to fish, and even if they are, they're not safe to consume. Right? So the priest actually stood up and actually started to advocating for the authority, local authority, to help the Vietnamese citizen. What happened? They were met with thugs. They was met with constant harassments. Their mass, their normal mass, every day was interrupted by so-called police in plain clothes. This is ridiculous. In Australia, that would be headlines straight away on Channel 9, on Channel 10, Channel 7. So, it's actually disrupting a practice of a peaceful religion. There is nothing wrong of actually a citizen of wanting to have some freedom rights, basic freedom rights, basic freedom of speech, basic freedom of religion, and that's all we want. But they were met with lengthy jail sentence. Right, the so-called, imagine people, the Vietnamese citizen was actually turned up to court only for 1 day, and straight away the judge will give their verdict straight away. 16 years in jail, 8 years in jail, and there is no avenues of appeal, ladies and gentlemen. Not like in Australia. So this is my fellow Australian. I am humbly actually speaking with you as your fellow Australian to help us. Please help us. Please help the Vietnamese people. Please uphold the values that Australians have for a long time. The Honourable Malcolm Fraser, he has said that, and I believe in him absolutely. And I think that you, like us, with values that we embrace that values. So join with us and call for freedom, democracy, human rights, freedom. The Vietnamese Communist regime out of Melbourne. Out. Vietnamese Communist regime out of Melbourne. Out. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that you are on an evening, you're getting ready for tomorrow, big race. The national race that actually, everyone's looking forward to. I know that. But I am just taking a moment of your time. You can sit here and actually listen to us. I'm presenting all the facts of what's happening in Vietnam. And I think us, as an Australian, we do have a duty of care. Care not just for your own fellow Australian, but also to care for other human beings as well. We cannot actually just stand by and watch if other human beings are dying. We cannot do that. And that is exactly what happened in Vietnam, ladies and gentlemen. Your fellow human beings are being murdered by one way or another. By the regime in official clothes, by the regime in plain clothes, by the regime that actually deliberately release water from electrical dam that generating power to a lower stream, and that's actually cost hundreds of Vietnamese lives being costed, ladies and gentlemen. This is unacceptable in my view. So please speak to your MP, join with us, find out, go on the internet and find out what the real situation is. Very easy for you to spend 5 minutes and find out what the real situation of the human rights in Vietnam are. Help support us raise it with your MP, raise it with your family members, and raise it with your neighbors as well, ladies and gentlemen. Talk to your MP, ask our Prime Minister to raise his concern to the Vietnamese counterpart that he's going to attend at the summit, the APEC summit this November. Ladies and gentlemen, join with me and call for freedom, democracy. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. Mr. Bond is the president of the Vietnamese community in Australia. I thank you for your attention, and I think this is a very important message we want to pass on to you. We are not here just to protest, but we are here to ask you, as our fellow Australian, to pay more attention to the situation of human rights and freedom in Vietnam. Why should we care? We should care because the situation of North Korea show that if we don't care about what's going on in the world, if we don't care what's going on in the nuclear power countries like Iran and others, actually it would threaten our freedom. And particularly, ladies and gentlemen, why should we be here and raise our voices? Because simply in Vietnam, our people, 90 million of them, cannot speak for themselves, cannot protest about the environmental disaster that they are facing. They cannot, I'm so, yes, thank you. And because the 90 million people in Vietnam today, they have no voice, and yet all the aids that Australian government gave to the communist regime had been used on police, had been used on weaponize the police, and more truncheons, more guns, more bullets to fire at and to hit on the heads of those who dare to protest, who dare to ask for human rights. And ladies and gentlemen, $87 million per year of our taxpayer money was given to this brutal regime in Vietnam, ladies and gentlemen, to improve human rights. And yet the people in Vietnam today, if they dare, if anyone dare to raise the issue of human rights or freedom or democracy, they will face with imprisonment, they will face with brutal forces, they will face with brutality, ladies and gentlemen. That is what $87 million a year of our taxpayer money has been spent by the Vietnamese communist regime. Not only they pocket this money, not only from Australia, from the European Union, from other countries as well. They become filthily rich. The last count, the Prime Minister and a few government officials or the Secretary General of the Communist Party in Vietnam have been listed among one of the richest, people in the world. How could that be? Whereas 90 million Vietnamese today are living in abject poverty. Actually, Vietnam GDP has actually been ranked worse than per head than Cambodia. How can the country with a lot of hard-working people like Vietnam, with the intelligence of Vietnamese people, give them the freedom and see what we have contributed to Australia in terms of economic, intellectuals and all. We are not stupid people. We are not dumb people. We're hardworking. We're very intelligent. But when we give no rights to and freedom to exercise our talents and so on, that is what led our country to the situation today. Ladies and gentlemen, that is why freedom and democracy and human rights are utmostly important for the people in our country. And if our country is free, we would stand up against China. We would stand up against China expansionism. Because today in Vietnam, if you dare to stand up against China, you'll be put in jail. You'll be charged with treason. How can you be patriotic, protecting your country, expressing your concern for your country, and yet you are charged with treason? Ladies and gentlemen, there was a songwriter, his name is Viet Khan. He just made 2 songs expressing his concern for the belligerent expansion and taking control over Vietnam by China communist regime. He was put in jail for 7 years. 7 years for 2 songs. Mind you, what kind of, and of course, his imprisonment have inspired the whole generation of people in Vietnam, both overseas here and inside Vietnam. We feel that is the freedom that the Vietnamese communist regime bestow on its citizens. That is imprisonment for 7 years for composing 2 patriotic songs, mind you, in Vietnam against China. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what 87 million Australian, your money and my money, has been given to this regime. Right now, the money they receive is up to 2 billion Australian dollars over nearly 20 to 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, we rather see that kind of money given to our school, given to our hospital. Why today Australian students had to debt up over their heads and never have a hope of paying off, whereas they got the money, nearly $2 billion, to give to murderers and atrociously human rights abuse like the Vietnam. Why? Why give them money to improve human rights, whereas today the Vietnamese people have none of that? In fact, the environments have been totally destroyed, and the regime are more belligerent than ever. Ladies and gentlemen, enough is enough. Let you get onto online and talk to your MPs, talk to our foreign minister, talk to our prime minister. Enough is enough. No more foreign aid to a country like Vietnam. We can understand that money given to democratic country like Fiji and even the Papua New Guinea and so on are worth given because they are democratic, but not to a murderous regime like the communist regime in Vietnam. We should not and continue to waste our taxpayer money, ladies and gentlemen. Instead, we should listen to the voice of the people of Vietnam crying out daily that, ladies and gentlemen, so please join with us by saying freedom, 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 human rights, human rights, human rights, democracy, 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 human rights, freedom, human rights, freedom, human rights, freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your patience, for your, stand and listen to our messages. Because today, ladies and gentlemen, the Vietnamese communist regime have been using the aid money that Australia give it to them to be inside our Crown Casino. To, ladies and gentlemen, to do what? To misleading, to hide about the facts of Vietnam, about the real situation of Vietnam today. And that is why we are here. We don't want the Vietnamese to give the Vietnamese communist regime, a terrorist regime, a free run in our freedom land, a free run in our venues. Ladies and gentlemen, we must speak up to the people of Vietnam. And that is why we thank you for showing your concern and sharing with us your concern. We thank you very much, our fellow Australian. As a Melburnian, I know that we do care about freedoms. We do care about human rights. We do care about democracy of other people in the world. Because if we don't, it will affect us. Just like Kim Jong-un and North Korea right now, affecting us, because as a communist regime, they answer to nobody. They kill, they maim, they imprison, they do whatever they like. They account to not to their people. And that is why they are danger to our democracy, it's danger to our safety and security and sovereignty included. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you.